Okay, so this is a continuation of chapter 5. I already read the introduction to that. So, what this is, I'm going to be reading what was Sandra Rusick's statement to to Dave Baumhover after the murders, and Cindy Watts is going to be responding to parts of it. So, um, I'll let you know whose part is which at the beginning of each paragraph. And it's Cindy Watts and Sandra Rusick, and I'll identify them by Cindy and Sandy. And if I giggle a little bit at inappropriate times, please forgive me. And I am in no way laughing at the situation. It's just maybe bad grammar and stuff. So it's it's just a thing. So sorry about that. Okay. Attention, Dave Baumhover. This is from Sandy. In 2009, Shanann built her house in Charlotte, North Carolina, battling her lupus. Her friend told her about her cousin Chris, saying he was a very nice guy, quiet, etc. So Shanann got a request from him on Facebook. Months later, she called me saying, "Mom, I met a nice guy. He is a mechanic." I said, "As long as you're happy and he is good to you." Cindy. There isn't too much to add to this paragraph other than to say that the friend of Shanann's was our nephew's former wife, Nicole Can- Canaday, I believe is the last name, and that during this time we were still confused as to how to pronounce Shanann's name, as her parents always referred to her as Shannon, and that Chris announced that he was going to change the spelling of his name at her suggestion to Christopher, C-R, C-R-I-S-T apostrophe F-E-R. And I'll admit we laughed at him. We never heard about Christopher again. Sandy. A few months after that, Shanann and Chris had a family gathering, and Frank, I, and his parents had a cookout. They were all floored when they saw her house. Shanann was a hard worker and wanted this to eventually sell and make a profit, to keep doing so eventually to be mortgage free. Comes from a family of contractors. Cindy replies, "The barbecue where we first met Shanann's parents was at their house in August of 2010. It's a nice middle class home." I've already mentioned that Shanann was much more open and talkative about personal matters than I am. I found her mother Sandy to be much the same. In the first few minutes that we met, she pointed at Frank Sr. and said, and I quote, "I've only had 3 good years with that man," unquote. Shanann had previously told us that her father was an alcoholic and that her brother had drug problems, which was a conversation I'd felt badly about, as I don't believe in airing family problems. At the time she had spoken, I wondered if Chris, in this new kind of tell all relationship, had told her about our own family's private pain. And then Sandra. My husband had in 2003 developed a cocaine problem, which lasted for an entire year. Wait, I've got this wrong. I'm sorry. Okay, I believe this is still Cindy. I'm so sorry. Okay, so this is still Cindy. My husband had in 2003 developed a cocaine problem which lasted for an entire year. Chris had been at college at the time, and we had never spoken of it outside of our small family. But I figured when Shanann had said about her father and brother that Chris, or as he was temporarily known, Christopher, had shared that with her. So I was uncomfortable and sad when Sandy said that about her husband. I didn't know either if it meant that he had been sober for 3 years and now that she was happy, or if he had started drinking after their first 3 years. I didn't ask. Back to Sandra. So Shanann was eager to please his parents, waiting on them hand and foot. When Shanann left the back porch, it was just me and Chris's mom. She leaned over to me and said, "Shanann was married before?" Question mark. I said yes, just like your daughter was. And then later, again when we were alone, she said that I just don't see it. And I said, "What?" And she said, "I don't feel or see that your daughter loves my son." I knew she was going to be a thorn in the marriage because my mother in law was the same way. Cindy's response: "This is a painful process. I won't lie to any of you. I've never read this before. I didn't read the discovery documents. I've been in a bad place since the murders. I guess I wish I had read it, but I also wish I had never spoken publicly at all about it during that time, because then I also believed everything my son told me. And that is, as I am finding out, no more truthful than this letter of Sandy's. Anyway, Kathleen sent this letter to me when we were at the beach last week, and now I have read it, and so now I want to answer it. The conversation that Sandy refers to about my remarks regarding Shanann loving my son did indeed take place several years later following an argument and then an apology I made. I'll get to that later. As for the remarks about either her daughter being married before or mine, no, that never took place at all. This was a barbecue and we had just met, and I don't have an intimate conversations, or at least I don't start them with people I don't know. Sandy did over time let me know that she had hated her mother in law, but I can't remember how that came up, and it certainly wasn't on this occasion. If she thought that about me as Shanann's future mother in law, I didn't know, and she didn't say. And then Sandra, continuing with the discovery. So every time we had cookouts, his mom and sister were very quiet and distant. We Okay, what it really says is, so every time we had cookouts, his mom and sister were very quiet and distant, and we weren't accepted. That made that no exclamation. Um, I know she wrote this under duress, so I am not criticizing at all. I'm just going to read it the way I know she meant it. So every time we had a cookout, his mom and sister were very quiet and distant, and we weren't accepted. They made that known. Cindy's response is, "I guess all I can say to this is we are a pretty quiet family overall. Ronnie is extremely quiet, and Sarah is one of those people who truly believes if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. Her husband, Steve, is also quiet. It's true. So is Chris, and all of us hate arguments. I think I can see how a more extroverted type of family might view us as distant, but we weren't trying to be. It's just the way we are. If there is a person in our family who shows emotion or loses their temper, I guess that would be me." But I promise that was before our son and Shanann began their relationship, and I can't remember a single incident where I had before. I usually just put my head down and try to forget about things. Their dating and marriage changed me, and not in a way I'm glad of. Um, Sandra Rusick, Sandy, said, "So forward to the engagement party. Shanann had shopped for food, wine, etc., spent a lot. Chris's sister wanted all of the invitations so she could help. So Shanann told me, 'Mom, she wants to help send off the invitations. What do you think? She is accepting me. I'm going to let her do it.' So this mom and sister prepped food and cross contaminated everything. So Shanann couldn't eat any of it. Gluten free, nothing. Everything was made with gluten. So thank God I brought, at least my daughter could eat. So as the night went on, Shanann and I went in the bathroom, and Shanann told me, Mom, I had like 80 invites and only immediate family came. So Shanann called people the next day to learn that they never received an invitation. Shanann was devastated. Cindy's response: I'm not sure where to start. Maybe I should begin by explaining that by the time my daughter and I had thrown a bridal shower for Shanann in October of 2012, Chris and Shanann were living in Colorado. They had moved there and in with the Dietzes, I believe that's how you pronounce the name, in May of 2012. Chris had taken a job with Longmont Ford. We didn't have any gatherings before she flew back to North Carolina for the pre-wedding stuff. As to the engagement party, I'm assuming is what Sandy is speaking of, the bridal shower we gave her, which I have already addressed. Shanann's second engagement party was given by Nicole Canaday, not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, given by Nicole Canaday, who was Shanann's matron of honor, and we had nothing to do with food or invitations or anything at all. In fact, we didn't even attend that one. I heard about it later from family friends who did. Apparently, Nicole made a toast and said humorously, quote, I know there are people who would like to kill me for bringing these two together, unquote. Now, I guess I'd better explain our absent from the second engagement party. There had been an earlier engagement party that was thrown by another friend of Shanann's. Ronnie and I did go, and for whatever reason, we had seriously screwed up in Chris's eyes, because he called us the next morning and said that we had really embarrassed him the night before. This came out of the blue to Ronnie and me, and I was particularly upset by it. So we canceled our plans to attend the second party so as to avoid embarrassing Chris again. If you were beginning to wonder if I ever realized that it wasn't only Shanann who didn't seem too much like us, or at least me, yeah, I did catch that a while back. What I didn't see was this. If you had asked me if I had a good relationship with my son before he met and fell in love with and married Shanann, and if I thought he loved me, I would have answered yes to both. I would have blamed her for how he had begun to treat us, but I don't know now if that was true. I have to wonder. What I still don't question is that I have always loved him and that I always will. But I guess if you were wondering if I know him or ever really did again, I would say I thought so once and now I don't. Shanann and Chris were upset, so they knew not to ask again. Then came the wedding. No one, I'm not sure, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if this particular paragraph is Shanann's mother Sandy or Chris's mother Cindy, but it says Shanann and Chris were so upset they knew not to ask again. Then came the wedding, and no one from his whole family came, just his grandmother and uncle. No mom, dad, sister, aunts, and cousins. No one came. Okay, that's obviously Mrs. Rusick speaking. Okay, and then I believe Cindy is here. This is pretty it looks like a rough draft, not a final draft. But anyway, the next chapter, I am told, deals with the wedding, and so I'll leave off answering that portion of Sandy's letter. This is Mrs. Watts, Chris's mother. I will tell you that following the wedding, I think I expected our son to apologize to us, but he never did. Instead, he wrote me the longest, ugliest email I've ever received. When Sarah came by the house later that day, she found me sobbing on the floor. She didn't comfort me. She said, and I quote, get up, get up. This is how things are now, and you have to face them and be strong. Unquote. I tried to do what she said. It was good advice. Following the wedding, we did not hear from Chris until we contacted him in April of 2012, after friends told us that he and Shanann had announced that she was pregnant on Facebook. And then this is Sandy Rusick. Chris spoiled Shanann and vice versa. They were so in love and they were a great team. They moved to Colorado and lived with Shanann's friend for 1 year while they were building their house. Everything was great. Shanann saw something on Chris. I'm sorry. Everything was great. Shanann saw something on Chris's private parts that didn't look normal, and they went to the doctors. And then in parentheses says the word cancer. So it was removed. She saved his life. Um, Cindy replies, according to Chris, so I'll call this family hearsay. Shanann once saw a spot on his penis. She she did once receive a pic. We did once receive a picture of his penis she sent to Ronnie's phone that we deleted. Chris Chris said she thought it was an odd looking thing, but that he chose to ignore it. There was never a single doctor's visit, and she never mentioned it again after taking the phone picture. Um, and then Sandy Rusick. Then Shanann got pregnant with Bella Marie. Everyone was so excited and happy. Shanann and Chris were wonderful parents. Chris and Shanann were working at the Ford dealership in Longmont. Shanann was selling cars. Chris was head mechanic, a great team. Shanann was top sales. Then Bella came, so Shanann stopped working because of high risk pregnancy. She was a trooper, though, through the whole thing. Both families seemed happy. Chris's sister never flew to Colorado at any time they were out there. Cindy replies, Shanann's pregnancy was announced on Facebook in April. We contacted them and everybody agreed to a fresh start. Ronnie and I don't have much money, but we bought the $600 stroller she asked for as a gesture of goodwill, and Sandy's right, both families seemed happy. We were, I think, more relieved than happy. I mean, we were very happy about a new grandchild, but by then we were so upset that Chris had refused to talk to us for months that we long before had begun blaming ourselves for it. We had to make up for not going to the wedding. We would do whatever he wanted, whatever she wanted. I don't know how long Shanann was at Longmont Ford, a few months. She quit while pregnant. It was not a high risk pregnancy, and there were no fertility drugs as far as we knew. They were married in November, and she was pregnant by February or March, and usually 4 months is not considered a long time trying period for a baby. Chris was not the head mechanic at Longmont Ford. That can take years, and he was only there for about a year. He was a line mechanic, but he was working 6 days a week and making between $60,000 and $80,000 that year. It's probably how he was able to qualify for the house in Frederick. Shanann did not get any money from her house in North Carolina and had to sell it furnished. Whatever happened during the sale must have hurt her credit, so Chris had to apply for the loan alone. His job at Longmont was really a good one for him, but it was 6 days a week, and that annoyed Shanann. She told him he had carpal tunnel syndrome from the work and needed to quit. So he did, and he began at Anadarko for about 20,000 less than he had been making. They did not build their house. It was a pre-planned subdivision, and that was one of the different models available. The largest one at the time. Later had three car Later some had 3-car garages. And then I believe this is Sandy talking again. Cindy and Ronnie came 2 times a year. Shanann worked at Children's Hospital at nights and sold 31 bags, travel bags on the side. Everything was good. Shanann got pregnant with Celeste, and pregnancy was really rough on Shanann with her lupus. Very high risk pregnancy again, but only this one was worse for Shanann. Water weight gain, severe back pain, shortness of breath, pains in her chest, fatigue, and exhaustion. And then Cindy says, if Shanann was having a high risk pregnancy, no one, including she or Chris, mentioned it. She looked fine, seemed happy and healthy, and Bella was a beautiful, happy baby. I think they were probably struggling financially, though. Chris had been given some shift work at, or I'm sorry, Shanann had been given some shift work at Children's, as Sandy said. Her friend Jenna Dietz, I believe is the pronunciation, was there as a nursing supervisor, but the shifts were infrequent. Um, Cindy continues, I don't know if she made any money or not on the handbags. They were young and they had a baby with another baby on the way and a huge mortgage and only one car, Chris's Mustang. They didn't have any furniture, so they ran up some pretty high credit card bills furnishing the house, and so I guess they probably did feel somewhat overwhelmed and wanted some help from Sandy and Frank. I Cindy continues, I think family's important too. I worked for 30 years in credit control, and when Ronnie and I had our babies, my mom watched them during the day, and when I retired, I started getting to have Sarah's babies during the day, and it's a fine thing, a blessing in my life. I think that was one of the reasons we were so surprised when they moved out to Colorado. No family. We weren't thinking at the time there would be any babies for them, though. Shanann had told my best friend at their post-wedding breakfast, quote, oh, Cindy's going to be mad at me again. Again, I have endometriosis and won't be able to have any children, unquote. I shrugged it off. She already told us that she had lupus and fibromyalgia and celiac disease. I guess I had never thought about grandchildren from Shanann and Chris, and I didn't mind. We have grandchildren, so it was quite a surprise that she ended up being able to have babies, but a nice one. Sometime during the year before Cece was born, Frankie had come to stay out with them. Shanann said it was to help him with his drug problem. I don't know if Frankie ever had a drug problem or not. She also told us that he and her mom were both bipolar. I'll admit I thought Sandy could be a little bit overbearing, but she wasn't crazy or anything. And Frankie is just a sweetheart, always has been. I guess if I thought anyone was bipolar around there, it was Shanann. At any rate, he left after a few weeks, later telling us he hadn't much liked being quote unquote their butler. I thought it was funny. He's always been a very nice kid. Frankie and our whole family like he's always been a very nice kid, Frankie, and our whole family likes him a lot and are sorry that we can't talk to him anymore. One more thing to be sorry about. It's true that Sarah never went to Colorado. She wasn't interested, but for that matter, Frankie never went back either. So it wasn't until Shanann came for her 6 week stay in 2018 that either Sarah or Frankie got to meet Cece face to face for the first time. Um, Cindy says, my husband sold everything but our house and moved out to live with them to help our daughter in every way we could. Frank and I had to work to pay our bills too. We were there for 15 months. Then Cindy replies, Sandy is right. They did just that. They sold everything they had, including this real pretty pond with, I don't know how to say this, koi, Koi, in it. I think those cute little fish. They they moved to Colorado, and despite Shanann and Chris having a bedroom house, Sandy and Frank were put down in the unfinished basement. The way the bedroom situation worked was very specific. Master bedroom for Chris and Shanann. The girls each had their own room, and then and that was never open for discussion because they might keep each other awake. The remaining rooms were her office. I think she was selling both Unique and LuLaRoe by then, and the girls' playroom because Shanann didn't like toys in their bedrooms. So Sandy and Frank had the basement. They also, according to what Sandy told me, had to pay $1,000 a month and that they were there to help the kids. At the time they came, Chris and Shanann told us that it had been Frank and Sandy's choice alone because they wanted to be near their grandchildren. That made sense to me and Ronnie, but I think it was hard on them financially because they had to pay the mortgage on their house in North Carolina, where Frankie was still living, and pay rent in Colorado, too. They both had to get jobs. Sandy was a hairdresser and so got work doing that, and Frank drove a delivery truck for either Lowe's or Home Depot. I can't remember for sure which one. Their jobs helped with their finances but left Shanann short on child care during the day, so she enrolled both the girls at the Primrose School. And Sandy continues with her discovery statement. Chris's mom, wait, Okay, yes. Chris's mom came out to watch the girls for a few days while Shanann and Chris went on a business trip with Lavelle, her company, 4 nights and 5 days. During that time, we weren't allowed to see our grandchildren or even eat dinner with them as soon as we got home. She brought them upstairs and stayed upstairs. She wouldn't let us hold them or anything. I found that very odd. One day I asked her why. She said, what the hell am I here for then? She screamed in my face in front of my granddaughters and said that I was very controlling. I was just like, wow. I texted Shanann over and over again and she said, relax, Mom. I'll take care of it when we get home. It was ridiculous. I never spoke to Chris's mom again. I had had enough. Cindy's reply is, I'll give Sandy this much. That was a pretty disastrous trip to Colorado. Chris and Shanann had asked me to come and take care of the girls so they could go to, I think it was Punta Cana, for a Thrive thing which Shanann had started selling by then. I said yes. They sent me a ticket and Shanann offered to keep the girls in daycare if I wanted, but I said no, and the three of us had a good time during the day in their subdivision. It was a it was very nice there and all set up for families. Sandy didn't seem to want me there and made me nervous by getting angry at me after she said I had scratched one of Shanann's frying pans. The part about the girls not eating dinner downstairs is ridiculous. No one in their right mind would have tried to eat food anywhere in Chris and Shanann's house except for where the kitchen counter or in the dining room if they knew what was good for them. And I had to keep their totally set in stone bedtime ritual. Snack, shower, or bath, Tylenol, bed by 7 at the latest, no exceptions. One evening when Sandy had gotten home from work, the girls wanted me to take them to the basement where their bouncy house was. I did, and Sandy got in it with them, and they were having a good time. Fine. Then, then Sandy said I needed to bounce too. I said no, I just watch. She told me, or I said no, that I would just watch. She told me, quote, you don't know anything about children, Cindy, unquote. I was mad, I'll admit it, but then it got worse because it was 6:30 and I had to keep the girls on their schedule. So I took them upstairs and they weren't happy. I don't blame them, but those were the rules. They both had tantrums and Sandy came storming up and told me I was doing it wrong. Not sure what it was, but it was wrong, and I had had it, and I did scream, and I quote, what the hell am I here for then, unquote, and I did do it in front of Bella and Cece. Then I stopped off downstairs and sat on the couch and cried. And then when I just walked back upstairs and found Sandy in Cece's room, and I apologized. We actually had a nice talk after that, and she told me she loved Chris, but that he didn't speak up enough. When Chris and Shanann got back, there was some big fight between Sandy and Shanann, and Sandy packed up their car, her dogs included, in such a hurry that she didn't even have time to say goodbye to the girls or Chris. Shanann asked Frank to let her go and stay with her, but he didn't. He got in the car too, and they drove back to North Carolina, and that was that. Sandy says, after 15 months, I moved back home. It was hard to leave, but I felt it was for the best. It was hard to leave, but I felt it was for the best. That's in there twice. I have been home now 17 I have been home now. 17 months later, my whole family is dead. My beautiful daughter and my beautiful grandchildren, all dead in capital letters with three exclamations. Cindy said, God help us all. They are all dead, and He killed them, and I don't have any answers. Just grief and endless regret. Did I make him this way? Should I have done more, done less? What could I have done differently? Could I have stopped it? I miss those little girls. I'll always miss them. But what is worse is they lost their lives and all the long years that belonged to them by rights. He took those years, and I don't know if he understands at all what he's done to us and the Rusiks, the people he left behind. And that is the end of this. If I find any more to this book, I will upload it. And now I feel like I'm going to cry. So thank you for listening.